Okay, so imagine this. What if the story you thought you knew, right, the one about the very beginning of humanity, what if it's missing a really vital chapter, like a sacred text, maybe even written by Adam himself, a book that existed before Genesis, but was deliberately, silenced? Let's unpack this a bit. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something fascinating, really mysterious, and honestly, surprisingly relevant. The Book of Adam. Sometimes it's called the Book of the Words of Adam, or the life of Adam and Eve.
Yeah, and our mission today really is to explore the evidence. Is there proof this book existed? And if so, why was it seemingly, scrubbed from sacred history? And maybe most importantly, what was in it? What incredible insights did it hold that were considered just too dangerous to keep around?
Absolutely. And you've shared some incredible source material with us, things we want to walk you through. We're going to pull out the most powerful nuggets, help connect the dots, and maybe uncover some perspectives that have been, hidden for centuries. So let's start right there with the central mystery. If this Book of Adam was supposedly so foundational, why isn't it in Genesis? I mean, did Moses mention it somewhere and we just missed it? Or was it something else?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's something that, ancient rabbis, early Christian monks, scholars, they've wondered about this for ages. There's this sort of persistent whisper through history about an earlier original writing, a kind of sacred family text, passed down, supposedly, right from Adam, containing direct instructions, visions, even like intimate talks between Adam and God. And it's not just folklore. We actually see evidence crop up through obscure manuscripts found in ancient caves, forgotten libraries. We find hints, tantalizing references in ancient documents. Things like the Apocalypse of Moses. That's an apocryphal text, right? Sacred to some, but not in the main Bible. And you also see echoes in Ethiopian literature, Armenian texts, various other apocryphal writings.
Wow. So it wasn't totally unknown back then. The sources suggest that patriarchs like Seth and Enosh, they actively kept these writings safe. There's even this wild idea that Noah, took fragments of this knowledge onto the ark before the flood. So how does something seemingly so important to early history get pushed aside, as religious structures became more centralized?
Yeah, okay, this is where it gets really interesting. What was so dangerous, so threatening about this book that someone apparently wanted it erased?
Well, the core issue, based on the fragments we have, seems to be what it contained. Revelations about Eden's spiritual nature, and maybe the most provocative bit, mentions of the presence of other beings on earth before him, Adam.
Yeah, that directly clashed with the narrative that was solidifying later on. The idea of Adam being absolutely the first, alone in a brand new world. So many scholars think its removal wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, strategic even, because it wasn't just a story about Eden. It was Adam's intimate first-person account, the actual dialogue with God, his raw feelings after the fall. It was direct testimony, not a myth passed down. And that quality, some sources made it too dangerous to keep among the sacred texts. Especially, for those wanting to control the narrative right from the start.
Right. So the danger wasn't just the specific details, but maybe the direct line it offered, bypassing the need for intermediaries or established religious structures that were forming.
Precisely. And if we look at some specific passages, the ones preserved in things like the Apocalypse of Moses or Ethiopian and Greek writings, the insights are pretty stunning. For instance, Adam talks about angels visiting him, comforting him after he's kicked out of Eden.
Really?
Yeah. Implying the divine connection wasn't just immediately cut off. He also mentions a light that shone in the garden before the creation of the sun.
A light before the sun.
Suggesting Eden had its own, maybe spiritual light source, not dependent on the physical sun we know, hinted its unique nature. And even more intriguing, mentions of beings who walked the earth before it was formed from dust.
Whoa. Okay. Beings before humans.
That's what it suggests. It raises big questions, right? Who were they? What does their existence mean for the timeline of creation we usually think about? The Book of Adam seems to complicate that simpler story.
And what about Adam himself? Did he have any sense of what was coming, the future?
Oh, absolutely. And his visions. They're described as deeply disturbing. He apparently saw the future of the earth, wars, suffering, and the rise of a people who would reject the Creator. He wept, the texts say, not just for his own mistake, but for everything that would follow, a kind of profound foresight. Some scholars argue these visions were just too prophetic, revealing secrets maybe meant only for the last days, too much for earlier people to handle.
That's quite a weight for the first man to carry. And his connection to Eden itself, you said that's described differently too.
Yes, very differently. It's not just portrayed as a physical garden, The sources describe it as having multiple layers. Spiritual, angelic, and earthly. They mention a door of light used by angels, and this constant divine song.
A divine song, wow.
Yeah. It positions Eden almost as a direct, like a connection point, a hub between heaven and earth, a much deeper, more complex reality than we often picture.
And it goes even deeper, suggesting Earth had a history before humans.
It seems so. Unpacking some of these fragments, Adam apparently claimed he heard conversations between God and other beings before its creation, that the earth was like already being observed long before let there be light. Yeah. Which lines up, interestingly, with clues in other non-canonical texts, like the Book of Enoch or Gnostic writings, those texts exploring secret spiritual knowledge. It hints at maybe a previous creation, or some kind of celestial structure already in place before humanity, like the universe wasn't just sitting empty. And then there's maybe the most delicate point. According to some records, this book talked about a spiritual war in the heavens before humanity was created. Adam supposedly got this knowledge directly from God, maybe as a warning. He would have seen the fall of some powerful celestial being, one who opposed God's will.
So Adam wasn't just the first man, he was like the first guardian of this huge cosmic truth. A truth maybe later powers wanted hidden.
That's one interpretation, yeah. And adding to that, some Ethiopian manuscripts have this really striking passage. It describes a fallen angel trying to convince Adam he was the one wronged, arguing, I'm also God's creation, but I got rejected for disobeying an unjust command.
Wow, that challenges everything. The idea that man was totally cut off after the fall. It suggests maybe continued interaction, or even a shared kind of struggle. It's powerful, too, hearing that other passages mention Adam's tears falling to the ground and creating hidden springs. Mystics connect that to sacred rivers, maybe even the rivers of Eden. What does that tell us?
Well, it reinforces this idea, doesn't it? That Adam was more than just, the first guy. He was this profound link between the spiritual and the material. His pain, his grief, even his tears, they could physically alter the earth. It suggests his fall had this cosmic weight far beyond just one person's mistake. There's also this really enigmatic part where Adam tells Eve about a book that will be closed and will only be opened at the end of time. And
Yeah.
he apparently says, when it is read again, the children of the serpent will tremble.
Children of the serpent. Wow.
Yeah, and that phrase, it echoes in Gnostic texts in old versions of Enoch. It suggests this suppressed truth that, in some traditions, is believed to still be out there, just waiting for the right time.
And the very start of the book, the fragments that survive, you said they're quite moving.
They really are. The oldest bits seem to begin with his memory Adam had
Yeah.
of light, a divine brightness surrounding him before the fall, not sunlight. And when he was expelled, what he mourned most wasn't the garden itself or a tree, it was losing that light and the silence that fell on the earth after his fall. Like creation itself stopped. Trees stopped singing, water stopped flowing.
So sin wasn't just spiritual, it actually broke the rhythm of creation, impacted the whole cosmos.
That's what it seems to suggest, yeah. And there's this profound division he talks about.
Yeah.
The son of the earth versus the son of heaven.
Yeah.
Saying his descendants would split between those focused only on the material world and those who remember the creator.
A conflict older than Cain and Abel, even.
Exactly. It takes on this quite sobering prophetic tone about where humanity was headed.
Okay, so it sounds like there were real efforts to make this book disappear. How did any of it survive all these centuries?
Well, despite those attempts, fragments did endure. You had monks in North Africa, communities in Ethiopia, certain rabbis in the East. They kept copying bits and pieces for centuries, apparently driven by this deep respect for the name of Adam. They saw him as maybe the first prophet, a source of primal wisdom. They just sensed something powerful in these words that had to be preserved, even in secret.
And because of them, these anonymous guardians,
Yeah.
today, fragments are popping up online from old libraries being translated by independent scholars. And these fragments, loose pieces, they start to form a picture, a surprisingly clear and frankly disturbing picture.
And that picture gets even sharper when you connect it to other ancient finds, like manuscripts found at Qumran, right, the Dead Sea Scrolls. They mention sealed books. And some passages even name Adam as the original author.
Really? So the Book of Adam might have been...
It suggests, that the Book of Adam could have been the primary source for other later revelations. Maybe even the Book of Enoch itself, like it was the parent text, removed deliberately so the later pieces wouldn't make complete sense on their own. Finding the master key on
It's
us.
huge. And there's this symbol you mentioned that appears in different ancient cultures.
Yes, the symbol of two interlocking circles with a central dot. It shows up at the end of some Book of Adam passages. Some interpret it as, heaven and earth joined, or maybe a portal. But what's fascinating is you also find this exact symbol on ancient artifacts from Mesopotamia. and on Egyptian inscriptions.
So what could that imply about how far this book's influence spread?
It raises a really powerful question, doesn't it? What if the Book of Adam, or at least the core ideas it held, what if they influenced whole civilizations? Way beyond just the Hebrew tradition. It hints that maybe it was a kind of spiritual key, a foundational code that ancient people tried to preserve through shared symbols across cultures. So why does rediscovering this stuff seem to strike such a chord today? I think its essence is really a call to repentance, a call for direct reconnection between the creator and creation without intermediaries. It presents humanity not as just, watching the divine from afar, but as active participants, endowed with spirit, vision, a voice.
And that idea, that's always powerful.
Always. And maybe, for those who prefer people not have that direct understanding, maybe it's seen as profoundly dangerous.
Yeah, it's fascinating how this ancient text, when you look at the fragments, doesn't necessarily contradict the stories we know. It deepens them, fills in some blanks, answers questions maybe left hanging. It sounds like it was feared, not because it was false, but because...
Well, people who feel awakened, connected directly.
Yes.
They're harder to manipulate, right?
Yeah.
Harder to control.
Exactly. And Adam himself, according to these fragments, sort of prophesied its return. He supposedly wrote that in the last days, his writings wouldn't be revealed by kings or the wise elite, but by babes.
By ordinary people.
By ordinary people. The humble would recognize its voice, he said, while the proud would reject it. And he warned that when this happened, the serpent would move again, suggesting a big spiritual shift. This reopening of the Book of Adam, as he apparently foretold it, would kick off something much bigger, irreversible. It positions Adam not just as humanity's beginning, but maybe the first to glimpse its end and the first to weep for it. So this return, it isn't just some historical footnote. It feels spiritual, almost like we're being prompted somehow to reopen this ancient scroll that's been, silently waiting, like a bridge being built between the very beginning and whatever comes next. And maybe it's happening now, not by accident, but out of some kind of necessity as people search for a deeper understanding.
So it makes you think, doesn't it? Just take a moment. Why were so many of these profound truths apparently buried? Who really benefits, ultimately, from a humanity that feels disconnected from its spiritual roots, from the full scope of its own story?
And if Adam, even after the fall, could still hear God's voice, still receive visions, then maybe, just maybe, we all have a deeper potential for that connection than we usually think. Maybe the story that started with him is still waiting for us, for you, to help complete it. The Book of Adam, it's more than just an old artifact. It's like a witness. It was there when it all started. And its words resurfacing now, they aren't just history. They're described as seeds. Seeds that, if they land on fertile ground, could awaken something that not even time can erase. Perhaps the Book of Adam really is a missing key to unlocking some deep ancient memory within you.